For 40 days, fear ruled the battlefield. Every morning, the armies of Israel stood frozen in place as a giant stepped forward from the enemy line. His voice thundered across the valley like a storm.
Choose one man to fight me!
But no one moved. Not the soldiers, not the commanders, not even the king. The giant's name was Goliath, and to the people of Israel, he seemed impossible to defeat. The valley of Elah stretched wide beneath the burning sun, separating two armies waiting for war. Dust drifted through the air. Shields trembled in nervous hands. Every soldier knew the same terrifying truth. No ordinary man could stand against Goliath. He towered above everyone around him, covered in heavy bronze armor that glinted beneath the sunlight. But after 40 days, silence was still the only answer. Then, far from the battlefield, a shepherd boy walked through the quiet hills of Bethlehem. His name was David. He was not a warrior. He carried no sword. No armor rested on his shoulders. Most people would have overlooked him completely. He spent his days caring for sheep beneath the open sky, protecting them from danger while music echoed softly from his harp in the evening wind, while armies prepared for battle. David lived a simple life, far away from kings and war. But sometimes, God chooses the most unexpected people. One morning, David's father asked him to bring food to his older brothers serving in the army. So David packed the supplies and began the long journey toward the battlefield. As he approached the camp, he heard shouting echo across the valley. Soldiers rushed nervously between tents. Fear filled the air like smoke. Then David saw him. Goliath stepped forward once again from the enemy lines, larger and more terrifying than anything David had ever imagined. The giant raised his weapon and roared his challenge across the valley.
Send me a man to fight!
The Israelite soldiers lowered their eyes. Some stepped backward. Others refused to even look at him. David could hardly believe what he was seeing. An entire army, paralyzed by fear. He turned to the soldiers around him.
Why is no one fighting him?
David asked. The men stared at him in disbelief.
You don't understand.
One soldier shouted.
That giant has been a warrior since his youth.
But David continued watching the battlefield, confused by the fear surrounding him. To everyone else, Goliath looked unbeatable. To David, he was just another obstacle. Word of the young shepherd's questions quickly spread through the camp until eventually it reached King Saul himself. The king ordered David to be brought before him. Inside the royal tent, Saul looked down at the boy standing before him. David appeared young, untested, completely out of place among hardened soldiers.
You cannot fight this man. You are only a boy,
Saul said, but David's voice remained calm.
I have protected my father's sheep from lions and bears. When they attacked, I fought them with my own hands.
Saul listened carefully as David spoke with unusual confidence.
The same God who protected me then will protect me now.
For a moment, silence filled the tent. Then Saul slowly nodded. He had no better option. The king ordered his own armor to be placed onto David. Heavy bronze plates covered the shepherd boy from head to toe. A sword hung awkwardly at his side. But as David tried to walk, he could barely move. This was not who he was. Slowly, he removed the armor piece by piece and laid it back down. Instead, David picked up the only weapon he truly trusted, his sling. Then he walked toward a nearby stream and carefully selected 5 smooth stones. Around him, soldiers watched in stunned silence. A shepherd boy carrying stones was about to face the most feared warrior alive. The battlefield grew quiet as David stepped into the valley alone. Across from him, Goliath stared down at the small figure approaching. Then the giant laughed. The sound echoed through the hills.
Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?
Goliath roared. The giant's voice dripped with mockery. He expected fear. He expected David to run. But David kept walking forward. Wind swept across the valley. Dust spiraled around their feet. Thousands of eyes watched from both sides of the battlefield. Then David spoke.
You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you with faith.
For the first time, the giant's smile began to fade. Goliath tightened his grip on the spear and charged forward. The ground thundered beneath his feet, but David did not stop. He reached into his pouch, pulled out a stone, and placed it into the sling. Faster and faster it spun through the air. The battlefield seemed to slow into silence. One small stone, one impossible moment. Then David released it. The stone cut through the wind with terrifying speed, and before Goliath could react, it struck him directly in the forehead. The giant froze. His massive body staggered. Then, with a thunderous crash that shook the valley, Goliath fell face first to the ground. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. The impossible had just happened. The giant who terrified an army had been defeated by a shepherd boy. Shock spread across the battlefield. Then suddenly the Israelite soldiers erupted with victory cries as fear turned into courage. The enemy army broke into chaos and fled across the hills. But in the middle of the battlefield, David stood quietly, staring at the fallen giant before him. Not because he was the strongest, not because he wore armor, not because he looked powerful, but because he refused to let fear decide his future. And thousands of years later, the story still survives for one reason: because everyone faces giants. Sometimes those giants are fear, sometimes doubt, sometimes failure. Sometimes the voices telling us we are too small, too weak, or too ordinary to succeed. But history has always remembered the people who stood up anyway, the people who walked into impossible battles when everyone else stepped back. And sometimes the smallest person in the room carries the greatest courage of all. If you enjoyed this cinematic story, subscribe for more legendary stories from history and the Bible. Thank you for staying until this moment.